So what have we been talking about in youth? What's the theme? Victorious. I have notes. That's the only reason why I have my phone, I promise. And I just have a question for you guys. So we talked about what we learned about victory, what we say true victory is. I asked you guys if you feel victorious. What are some areas that you don't feel victorious? School? It can be anything. It doesn't have to be academics. Levi, what are some ways that you don't feel victorious? And I'll go through this whole row because you are talking, so I think you guys have something to say. So what ways would you not feel victorious? Like, in what challenges do you have? Like, what areas do you feel like are hard for you in life?
I feel very victorious in my grades, but I just grade F's.
Okay, so school. That's okay. Sometimes that happens. What about you? Staying on task? Okay. What about you, Elena? Feeling loved? Okay. Gabby? Gabby will always reassure you that you are loved. Gabby? Doing the right things. Sometimes you feel like it's hard to do the right things. That's a real answer. How many of us sometimes feel like it's hard to do the right things? I feel like that all the time. But I do the right thing. I prevail. Okay, so I was asking the Lord to talk about victory, and in that, the Lord brought up like things we are challenged with, but what the Lord showed me was victory is found in our surrender. And I think that sometimes when we think of victory, that's the opposite you could feel like, because surrender is like waving your white flag, but surrender is like giving it to Jesus. Like it's like actually saying like, I can't do this, but he can do it through me. And I asked the Lord, how do I explain that, And he brought me to Galatians. Before we read Galatians, how many of you are familiar with the fruits of the Spirit? Love, joy, peace, kind. Okay. How many of you are familiar with the desires of the flesh? Because that would be the challenging parts. That is what makes it hard to stay on task, because self-control is a fruit of the Spirit. So if you have a hard time staying on task, you're not operating in a gift that you could have. Kindness is a fruit of the Spirit. If you have a hard time being nice and kind, you're not operating in kindness. Patience is a fruit of the Spirit. So sometimes it's hard to like sit and listen to someone, or like to give them like the benefit of the doubt, to have patience with them. So if you're not doing that, you're not operating in the fruit of the Spirit. But it's very often that we operate in what our flesh wants. And you guys are young, so I know what it feels like to operate in your flesh. Let's do a perfect example. If someone at school makes you mad, they're talking about you, okay? They're telling everybody a lie about you. Or maybe it's the truth. Maybe they decided that they found out something about you and they decided to go and tell all these people. Are you going to forgive them right away? Why not? Yeah. So it should be like an eye for an eye? Should it? But that's easier to do, correct? It says turn the other cheek. It says turn the other cheek. It says if somebody slaps you, if somebody hurts you, basically like give them the other cheek. Allow them another opportunity. It says forgive 70 times 70. Right, it's really hard, right? But you know who can help you do it? Jesus. And that'll make you a better person. And therefore you are victorious because you've surrendered. You've given up your right to make that decision. But that's very hard to do, correct? It is very hard to forgive somebody if they've lied about you. It is very hard. You guys are in relationships sometimes. It is hard to forgive somebody who breaks up with you. It might be easy for you, but I remember when I was 16, that was really hard for me. Like, how are you going to break up with me? Like, that's hard, right? That's a really hard thing to do, but we are called to forgive. We are actually called to do that. So let's talk about, hey boys, can you guys separate? I just want you to separate. I think the Lord wants to speak through this word to you. So let's read Galatians. Let's read it together. And we're going to start with the desires of the flesh. And just go with me because this is going to be really good if we pay attention, all right? So I say then, is this the beginning? Hold on. Sorry. Maybe I should get out of this version of the Bible really quickly. Yes, okay. I say then, walk by the Spirit, and you will certainly not carry out the desires of the flesh. No one in this house, for the flesh desires what is against the Spirit, and the Spirit desires what is against the flesh. These are opposed to each other so that you don't do what you want. Pause, go back. These are opposed of each other so that you don't do what you want. We got to surrender what we want to do. And we will find victory in our surrender. Let's go to the next verse. But if you are led by the Spirit, you are not under the law. Now, the works of the flesh are obvious. They might not be obvious to you, so let's talk about them, okay? Sexual immorality, moral impurity, promiscuity, idolatry, sorcery, hatred, strife, jealousy, outbursts of anger, selfish ambitions, dissensions, factions. It's not working? Oh, okay. Shoot, that's my fault. Okay, I'll read it to you. Factions, envy, drunkenness, carousing, and anything similar. I am warning you about these things as I have warned you before. Those that practice such things will not inherit the kingdom of God. So let's break down what these desires of the flesh are, because these are things we got to surrender. Sexual immorality. You guys are youth, so we can talk about it. Having sex before marriage is actually a sin. I'm not gonna sugarcoat that for you. It is. That does not mean the Lord will not forgive you. He will forgive you. But he desires for us to be married. Okay? I know that we don't say that a lot because we're like, I don't want to use that word to make someone feel uncomfortable. Actually, I care so much about you that I want you to feel a little bit uncomfortable, because I want you to know that you can give that to the Lord. So if you are struggling with that, there are leaders in this room, and trust me, we are not perfect. We have lived a life, and we had to lay some things down for Jesus, okay? So that's what that is. Moral impurity, they fall around the same lines, like being impure. I wrote these down for you. Dissensions are disagreements that lead to discord. Sorcery, like use of magic, dabbling in witchcraft. Faction, state of conflict. So basically, if you are you're living a life where you're constantly trying to argue, trying to mess up unity, trying to divide people, that is not what the Lord wants for us. He actually wants us to be unified. He actually cares about that. And that's hard, especially if your feelings are hurt, because the last thing you want to do is go be friends with somebody who hurt your feelings. Or get this, if your best friend is friends with somebody who you don't like, you'll be like, are you even my friend? Right? I have been that way. I still, as an adult sometimes, if somebody rubs me wrong, I'll think, Jasmine's my best friend. I'll be like, you better not talk to that girl. But that's not kind. RJ is my boy. I'll be like, that boy made me mad. He can't be your friend. That is not kind. I can't do that. I'm not going to sow disunity. I'm not going to sow discord. That's what my flesh wants me to do, because it feels good for a second. But think about the other side of that. That person's left alone, isolated, by themselves. What if that person was you? Would you want someone to treat you that way? Did Jesus treat you that way? He could have, but he never did. He never did, and he never will. But we have to not desire the things of our flesh. But these things seem appealing, it feels good to be loved. It feels good to have someone notice you and pay attention to you. It feels good for certain things. But when you live by your feelings and what your flesh wants, you are going against often what the Lord has for you. I didn't give Brad the fruits of the Spirit, but he got them because he's awesome. But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. The law is not against such things. The law is not against such things. We got to learn how to be gentle. We got to learn how to be self-controlled. We got to learn how to be loving, how to be kind, how to be honoring of ourselves, of the commitment. How many of you have given your life to Jesus? You've actually asked him into your heart. Okay? That's a sacred thing that you did. You asked the King of Kings to come into your heart. How many of you who haven't maybe one day want to? Ask him. He's always ready. He's always ready for you. And he is full of forgiveness. He is full of gentleness. He is full of love. But in order for us to live a victorious life, we have to be surrendered. We have to surrender what we want and ask the Lord what he wants. The goal is to inherit the kingdom of heaven. And that means if there is inheriting the kingdom of heaven, that means there is a place that's not heaven. That means that your life does matter. The decisions you make do matter. If you've accepted Jesus, you have decided that you want to surrender to him. Once you accept him, because this is a room of both. Once you accept him, you are saying, I want to learn more about what that looks like. And what that looks like is taking real inventory of your life and saying, God, I need help with this. And I'm not coming to you as somebody who has it all together. I was 13. I was 16. I was 17, 18, all of the teens. I was it. I was all the 20s too, but that's neither here nor there. And I know what it feels like to not want to give something up, to be so completely honest with you, to be like, I am okay with the life that I have. But I know what it feels like to encounter Jesus and to know that he's worthy of my attitude. He's worthy of my desires. He's worthy of my thoughts. He's worthy of it all. And I know how hard it is sometimes to give him those things. But I'm not asking you to look at yourself as a horrible person, but I am asking you to be honest and find something that you could surrender to him. Maybe you talk about people. We're not supposed to gossip. We're not. Maybe you lie. We're not supposed to lie. Jesus, help me not lie. Help me practice self-control so that I don't have to lie. In James, it says to learn to be slow to speak. Help me to do that so that I can tell the truth. Help me to desire to tell the truth. We have to surrender to the Lord to live a victorious life, because when you surrender, there is healing. How many of you have some areas in your life that you feel like you want to be healed from? I do. Maybe some past hurts and you're like, this still stings. I'm ready to give this up. Or maybe you have, like Elena said, maybe sometimes you don't feel loved. How many of you sometimes don't feel loved? Feel unseen? Feel like nobody would understand you? Everyone's raising their hands. You can surrender those insecurities to Jesus. And when you surrender them to him, you get to become victorious. That's victory. He is the King of Kings. He conquered death. There's nothing he cannot handle. And when you give it to him and you say, Jesus, I give you full control, you are now a victorious person. And I think that that's what Jesus wants from us every day. It's a daily surrender. When we were in worship and we were talking, the second song, it was talking about, like where the tears of the desperate reach the heart of the Savior. When you decide to give the Lord all of it and withhold nothing from him, one, he'll never withhold of himself from you. He's going to take care of all of those things. And I know that, like, it's easier to, like we said, when you are, like, having a bad day, it's easy to be mean to somebody. But have you ever encountered somebody who's really kind? And you've just been like, dang, that person is so nice. Like, they don't get mad. They're not easily agitated. Don't you like those kind of people? Do you ever think, I want to be like that? I wish that I didn't get so irritated, you know? I wish that I was patient. Pastor Anna's a really good example of being patient and kind. You can come to her with like an issue and she'll be like, okay, well, we can do that. We can help them. And I'm like, I don't want to help them. And she'll be like, no, but we can help them. She's quick to that. And I believe it's because she spends a life at the feet of Jesus. We can be like that too. There are going to be things that are harder to surrender. But once you make that first step, Jesus will remind you that he can take it. He can carry the weight for you. He actually didn't design this life for you to have to carry that weight. He wanted to take it. So I just wanted to talk to you guys about that because I think that I want to be a victorious person. I want to be successful. I want to be a person who accomplishes all their goals. But my goal is to live a life surrendered at the feet of Jesus. And there's a lot of stories in the Bible where you can see what that looks like. Have you guys ever heard the story of Joseph? If you haven't, I'll give you like a very quick, because it's a long story. So Joseph had brothers who didn't like him. They were jealous of him. Jealousy. Okay? Joseph was really, really cool. And they were just really jealous of him. So they decided they wanted to kill him, but they decided to sell him. They threw him in a hole, and they decided to sell him, okay? So Joseph ends up in the Pharaoh's house. Like, his brothers don't like him. They're operating in all their fleshly feelings. They're like, kill him, get him out of here. He's not getting nothing. And he ends up in the king's home after being sold, okay? I was reading through the story of him today, and I noticed that there's not many times in the story where he speaks a lot. Like, it's a lot about, like, this was said to Joseph. But in one particular setting, he was in Pharaoh's Potiphar's house. Yes. Potiphar's wife liked Joseph. It does say that Joseph was handsome, okay? So she was like, I like him. I want him. And he's in my house, so I should be able to have him. He was like, no. I want to read to you what he said in Genesis. Because I thought this was a really cool example of surrendering to the Lord. He said, no one in this house is greater than I am. He's talking about Potiphar. He has withhold nothing from me except you, because you are his wife. So how could I do the immense evil, and how could I sin against God? How could I, after I have been sold, I didn't know what was going to happen to me. I find favor because the Lord saw me and he chose me and he wants to use me. How could I give in to a fleshly desire and sin against God? And he doesn't. He gets kicked into jail and then he ends up living a great life. But I think that this speaks to how if we choose to not sin against God, and the desires of our flesh are sin. And sometimes we don't like to hear that word because we're like, how could I sin? I'm not a sinner. You might actually be. We all sin and fall short of the glory. Did you know that not listening to your mom is a sin? Did you know that when you're in this setting and the authority in this room asks you to be quiet and you don't, you're dishonoring authority? Did you know that that's considered a sin? Those are actual sins. It's crazy because it's so simple. You're like, I'm not sinning. There's no way I could be. When you talk back to your teacher, you're not supposed to do that at all. And I was the girl who talked back to my teacher and got kicked out of class. So I'm not saying this to you and trying to tell you that like, hey, it's so easy to do, but that's not cool. Actually, hindsight is that's not cool. I'm so thankful for forgiveness. I'm so thankful for Jesus. So I'm here to tell you that when you don't sin against God, when you actually decide to give him your all in the middle of a hard time, when it seems hard, when you actually surrender to him, you truly do become victorious. That's victory. That's living a life of victory. And I usually am up here and I love making you guys laugh and I love having a good time with you, but I think the best time is when we're all going to be in heaven. I think the best time is when you learn that you can overcome every obstacle if you give it to Jesus. And a lot of you raised your hand and said that he has your heart. So I say that you give him all of it. I think that this week, during your private time, I pray that you all spend time with the Lord, but you should find something and actually surrender it to him. Ask him to help you work on something. I know we can all think of something to have him work on, right? Like, are you perfect? No, I'm sure sitting here, you're like, oh, I could work on that. I could work on that. I could work on that. And Jesus wants to work on it with you. He'll love you patiently. He'll work with you through it. He'll always accept you with open arms if you come to him. And I want to end with Psalms 24. He who has clean hands and a pure heart, who has not lifted himself up to falsehood or to what is false, nor sworn deceitfully, he shall receive blessing from the Lord and righteousness from the God of his salvation. This is the generation of those who seek him, who inquire of and for him of necessity require him, who seek your face, O God of Jacob. Think about this for a second. That's what it tells us to do, so let's do it. And then, can you go back to 5 really quickly? 4. He who has clean hands and a pure heart, who has not lifted himself up to falsehood or to what is false. The desires of your flesh, though they may feel good, that is false. That is a false way to live your life. Okay? It is. It's not okay to lie. It's not okay to do the things that you think you want to do without consulting the Lord, especially if he's in your heart, because you have said you know better. You get to inherit the kingdom of God. Who wants to do that? I do. So we have about 15 minutes. We can do boy-girl groups. I just want to talk about some things that we can give to the Lord, some areas where we feel like I could surrender this to God. And I want you to be honest, because you have leaders who have had to surrender some really hard things to the Lord and watch him walk you through them. We can do all boy group, and we can do high school and junior high girls because we have enough leaders for that. So we can split up. Does that sound like a plan? Are you guys going to talk and share and let your leaders in? All right. Break.